Okay, so the first paragraph of the Shema is the Ahavta. Ve'ahavta, to love God. The second paragraph of the Shema starts V'haya im shamoa tishma'u, and it will be if you will listen to my commands. And then I will give rain, I'll give all blessings, all good things will come. But if you don't, so then that we'll endure some hardship and some challenges. So contrast this one, the second paragraph of the Shema, with the first paragraph. It's all about love. So the first paragraph of the Shema is about loving God, and the second paragraph of the Shema is about fearing God. Now, when we talk about fearing God, you know already, we've talked about this many times. Go to any Chabad, at any class, Lubavitcher, you talk about Chabad Hasidism. We know that when we talk about fear of God, we don't mean fear of punishment, because fear of punishment is not fear of God, it's fear of punishment. If I'm afraid, if I do what God wants out of fear, a fear of going to hell, a fear of retribution, a fear of being struck by lightning, so that I don't fear God, I fear lightning and I fear hell. So when we say fear of God, we're not talking about fear of being harmed, fear of punishment, fear of retribution. When we say fear of God, what we mean really is awe. Fear is not really the best translation. I like to use it because I'm trying to switch the way we understand what we say, because that's what people say, fear of heaven, fear of God. That's the most commonly used translation, but it's not the most accurate. It really means a sense of awe. And why we call it fear? Because when I'm in awe of something great, then my body acts in a fearful kind of a way. My heart beats faster, right? I'm edgy. I'm more introverted, right? Quieter. So I behave in all the characteristics that you'd see in fear, because the two are related, awe and fear. So what it means to say that we're a fear of God means awe of God, and awe of God. And we've talked about this now when we've been talking about the Tanya. So what does it mean to love God and to fear God? Or how is it that we come to love God, and how is it we come to fear God? So love and fear, the difference between them is that love is something that I pursue, that I'm after, that I can see, something that I can relate to. So when I reflect on the closeness to God, that leads to a feeling of love of God. That God is so close, he's so accessible, he's so available, that leads me to love God. Or in the context of the Shema, when we say Shema and we focus on the fact that God is the only true existence, and that becomes something, as we said with the Echad, we ingrain that in our minds and our hearts, there's a profound feeling of closeness. If all there is God, then there's nothing that separates me from him. Then there's no distance between us. So that closeness and understanding it in a way of being able to see it, when you see something, you can relate to it. So when we can connect with it in such a deep way that it's as if we're actually seeing it with our mind's eye, that leads to a feeling of love. But when God feels distant from me, that leads to a feeling of awe. In other words, awe comes when I feel that there's a huge gap between me, even if you see, let's talk about somebody that you look up to, that you admire tremendously, right? So somebody that you could be in awe of. So there are times that you feel love towards that person, and times that you feel awe to that person. When do you feel love? You feel love when you sense a feeling of closeness between you and them, a feeling of kinship. But when do you feel awe? When you sense that this person is so above and beyond you, intellectually, emotionally, talent-wise, whatever it is, they're so above and beyond me that I'm completely overwhelmed by a feeling of awe. So awe comes when there's a gap, when there's a distance, when I feel distant from you. That's the difference between the V'ahavta paragraph and the V'haya im Shema. They're two different modes of connecting with God. One focuses on the closeness, that's V'ahavta, and connecting with God in a way that we can see God, so to speak, with our mind's eye. Seeing God with our mind's eye allows us to feel close and therefore facilitates love. And V'haya im Shema tishmu, when we hear, meaning I hear something, I don't relate to it, I don't see it, it's not direct, it's something that's more mysterious, it's something that lies a little beyond me, so that leads to a feeling of awe of God. And therefore, that paragraph of the Shema, that second paragraph of the Shema, so we have this idea of love of God and fear of God, both of these things, Ava and Yira, love and awe, both come together in the Shema. That's why the Shema, the second paragraph, is couched in those terms. If you're going to listen, if you're not going to listen, because that's all about, that all relates to the element of judgment, of awe, of severity, which are all interconnected, and the idea of judgment. So I have a feeling of awe because I feel distant from God, and so therefore that feeling of awe is limiting. It restricts me, and the same is true with regards to divine judgment, which is restrictive. You do, you get. You don't do, you don't get. Things like that. So they're all related. So it's not that the second paragraph of Shema is couched in threatening terms. It's not that it's threatening terms, it's that it's in judgment terms. The idea of gevura, of severity, of awe, of fear, of yira. Those are the terms that paragraph is articulated in. Okay, so that's as far as the Shema. Today's chitas. So the Chumash